Pacific frontiers. At the far edge of our continent, the last place the sun sets on mainland America. In the westward march of American migration, this was the destination for the most courageous explorers, the boldest entrepreneurs, the settlers with the greatest taste for adventure, the visionaries with the most daring dreams. Here is where the long trek by wagon train would come to an end, the place where the stagecoaches would make their final stop. The pioneers said of this farthest westward reach of America, cowards never set out for it, and weaklings didn't survive. Today's traveler may still sense that same frontier spirit, here in the awe-inspiring country that lies along the Pacific. A desert and mountain realm rich in human drama and legend. Death Valley. Even the name evokes images of ghost towns, mirages, lost mines, and doomed wagon trains, and of perplexing natural mysteries. This valley in California is one of the hottest places on Earth and the driest spot in North America. Temperatures of 120 degrees are not uncommon during the summer. The record, 134 degrees, the second hottest temperature recorded anywhere in the world. Yet only 15 miles away, the Panamint Mountains loom up to 11,000 feet. Their peaks, more than 2 miles above the valley floor, are often covered with snow, even though on average, less than 2 inches of rain fall in the valley during the year. The valley was named by a party of settlers looking for a shortcut to the California gold fields. In 1849, they stumbled into the valley and were unable to find a way out to the west. They spent almost 2 months of incredible suffering before being rescued, and left behind the name, Death Valley. Perhaps because of the name, visitors are often surprised to discover that Death Valley is a place of abundant life. Many of these desert dwellers have made some of nature's most amazing adaptations in order to survive in this place of scorching temperatures and little water. Ground squirrels can turn down their metabolic thermostats and become dormant, living without food or water for months. The desert tortoise can store as much as a cup of water within its body. Bighorn sheep can get some needed moisture from green vegetation. In extreme circumstances, They can go without water for as long as 4 or 5 days. The gamble quail always lives within a mile or two of a waterhole. If the supply dries up, studies in captivity have shown that they can lose as much as half their body weight and still survive. The horned lizard displays a remarkable ability to hide from enemies by blending into its environment. Should this survival strategy fail, horns on its body are a very effective means of discouraging predators. The young, however, are quite vulnerable until their horns develop. There are hundreds of other fascinating creatures that are at home in Death Valley, from the deadly rattlesnake to the side-blotched lizard. As the day progresses, the lizard's skin gets lighter in order to reflect the sun's rays and keep its body temperature low. Human life in the valley may go back as far as 7,000 years. It is known that ancestors of the Shoshone tribe were living at the mouth of Furnace Creek at least 1,000 years ago. But it was the self-proclaimed desert rats, the independent gold seekers, who were to give Death Valley its most enduring human symbol. They came in waves after 1850 and left in their wake ghost towns with names such as Skidoo, Rhyolite, Chloride City, and Bullfrog, each with its own legends and myths of bonanzas, stock schemes, lost fortunes, and secret mines. However, the greatest mining fortunes were made not in gold, but in a more practical commodity, borax, widely used at that time as a cleaning agent. Starting in the 1880s, this so-called white gold of the desert was hauled out in enormous wagons to the railhead in Mojave, 165 miles away. Pulled by a 20-mule team, it was an incredible 20-day journey each way. The mule skinners and their animals became another symbol of Death Valley. It is ironic that this seemingly inhospitable place, a valley with the very name of death, is in reality a monument to the perseverance of life. In Sequoia National Park, just 80 miles away on the seaward slopes of California's Sierra Nevada range, grows the largest living thing on our planet. This craggy, venerable colossus, the giant sequoia, is popularly known as the Big Tree. It isn't height that makes the giant sequoia the king of trees. Though it is enormous, its relative, the coast redwood, can grow up to 100 feet higher. But for absolute size, no other living organism has the massive authority or the regal bulk of this dignified forest leviathan. Of all the giant sequoias, this particular specimen is the biggest. It is called the General Sherman tree, and it is quite simply the largest known living thing on Earth.
No, just a tree, no tree houses.
It is almost 275 feet tall, as high as a 27-story building, and some 2,500 years of age, already a 500-year-old veteran when Christ was born. And it is still growing, a vibrant, living organism so colossal that even when one stands and looks up at this giant, it is hard to imagine that such a tree actually lives. Yet it is surrounded by other trees almost as large. No one knows how long giant sequoias might live. The oldest are still healthy and reproducing. They are almost invulnerable to insects and disease. Science has never found one that simply died of old age. Their great enemies, aside from human beings, are wind and erosion. The surprising reason? These great trees are not deeply rooted. The root system may spread out for an acre or more, but the roots usually reach no deeper than 5 feet below the surface. Thus, the giant sequoia has to perform an incredible balancing act. Water-softened soil, high wind, undercutting by a stream, a heavy load of snow on the crown. Any of these can send the tree toppling. And toppling is the most common cause of death in these protected groves. Because of their great size, sequoias require tremendous quantities of water, which the Sierra Nevada range provides in the form of snow, 125 to 250 inches of it each year. The runoff from the snowpack is the lifeline of the big trees. Fire, sometimes intentionally set by forest rangers to imitate nature, burns the heavy layer of litter and duff off the forest floor, thus killing competing growth and opening the forest canopy to the sunshine that the seeds must have. An insulating blanket of bark, as thick as 2 feet, protects the sequoias themselves. Thus, the cycle of life begins anew with a tiny seedling that may someday stand among the largest living things on Earth, the big trees of Sequoia National Park. "180 miles west lies another of California's enchanted regions. It's been called the most astonishing meeting of land and sea to be found in Western America. This is the legendary Big Sur country. This region of bold headlands, raging surf, rolling highland meadows, and rugged cliffs has long dazzled visitors with its wild beauty. Here is how Scottish writer Robert Louis Stevenson saw it a century ago.
One common note of all this country is the haunting presence of the ocean. Everywhere, even in quiet weather, the low, distant roar of the Pacific hangs over the coast and the adjacent country like smoke above the battle.
The northern approach to this wildly beautiful land begins just south of the town of Carmel. Although there's no actual border to Big Sur country, this might be considered its gateway, the Point Lobos State Reserve. Punta de los Lobos Marinos, the Spanish call it, Point of the Sea Wolves. The sea lions still make their home in the outlying rocks of Point Lobos, along with large numbers of harbor seals and sea otters. For all of its wild beauty, less than half of this magic headland meets the eye. Almost 500 acres of Point Lobos State Reserve are on dry land, but 750 acres lie beneath the waters of the Pacific. The Point Sur Light Station stands sentinel over a coastline that to the south becomes ever more treacherous as the buttress of the Santa Lucia Mountains pushes the forests more precipitously to the sea. And just below this point, the two-lane road, California Highway Number 1, takes on a notorious cliff-hanging character. It took 15 years of labor, much of it by convict road gangs, to build the 50-mile highway. Until it opened in 1937, the only way in was by horse or by mule over tortuous mountain trails. So the settlers were few, and they were tough. According to local legend,
they train a mule to bring in the school teacher. Then they shoot the mule and marry the school teacher.
the spring meadows of Big Sur are thick and colorful, with California poppies and other wildflowers. The forest floor is lush, with streams wandering through the woodlands on their way to the Pacific. At high tide, McWay Creek, plummeting 50 feet over granite cliffs, is said to be the only waterfall in California to drop into the Pacific. Offshore, the sea is dotted with freestanding pinnacles. These rocks were once part of the mainland, eroded remnants of an ancient shoreline, battered constantly by the crashing surf. In time, they too will succumb to the ocean's great power and become part of the sand on the beaches of Big Sur. This unique land of promontory headland and twisted trees has inspired scores of writers, from John Steinbeck to Jack Kerouac, and of course, painters and photographers. One of the most honored men to immortalize the expansive beauty of this land with a camera was Ansel Adams. But the greatest fame for Adams came as the man who captured, on black and white film, the spirit and soul of Yosemite National Park. This valley is nestled deep within the heart of California's unforgiving high Sierras, a place protected by massive granite domes, shrouded in billowy mists. A sanctuary with white, snaking rivers that dance through rocks and trees, then explode into spectacular leaping waterfalls. Encompassing an area the size of Rhode Island, Yosemite National Park houses natural wonders that shatter world records. Of the 10 highest waterfalls on Earth, 2 are found here. Majestic El Capitan is the largest exposed granite block in existence, and certainly one of the most awe-inspiring. Soaring 3,600 feet above the valley floor, El Capitan is just one of the many great stoic monoliths that stand guard over the valley. Like defiant fighters, their faces bear the cuts and scars of having survived relentless glacial attacks. Each has its own textural identity, and according to Native American lore, each has its own spirit. The strangest yet most beautiful of the Great Cliffs is Half Dome. Its south side features the smooth dome shape for which it is famous. But the north side looks as if it had been sheared off with a great axe. Naturalist John Muir called the dome
the loftiest, most sublime and most beautiful of all the rocks that guard this glorious temple.
Sharing the glory with the massive giants are Yosemite's waterfalls. The glistening white ribbons of melted snow vault out over cliffs in what are known as free-leaping waterfalls, a phenomenon rarely found in nature, but abundant in Yosemite. The grandest of the valley's leaping cascades is Yosemite Falls. Its awesome descent of 2,425 feet makes it the second highest waterfall in the world, more than 13 times the height of Horseshoe Falls at Niagara. The name Yosemite is derived from the Miwok Indian word for grizzly bear. The names of many of the park's features and much of the valley's colorful folklore can be attributed to the different tribes that once inhabited the area. The first official record of white man's entry into the valley is 1851, when the governor of California sent in the Mariposa Battalion to rout the Miwoks. The returning soldiers told extraordinary stories about the beauty of the incomparable valley. In 1864, President Abraham Lincoln signed a bill to protect Yosemite Valley. It was the first time that the government had set aside a large section of land for the purpose of preservation. Today, visitors travel from all parts of the globe to enjoy the park's beauty and relax in its tranquility. They come to be regenerated physically, emotionally, and spiritually by the healing powers of one of nature's most inspiring gifts, Yosemite. The serenity of a vast blue mountain lake high in the Cascade Range of southern Oregon seems an unlikely place for an epic battle between Indian spirits or for one of the Earth's great cataclysmic explosions. Yet Crater Lake's peaceful setting was born in just such violence. This is the story that has been handed down through the centuries by those native to this land, the people of the Klamath tribes. A pair of imposing cliffs personify the hero and villain of this tale. One cliff represents Skell, spirit of light in the world above. The other reflects the personality of Lau, ruler of darkness and the underworld.
Lau, the underworld spirit, was angered by the people of the north. He emerged from the great mountain in a cloud of smoke and with a voice of thunder vowed to destroy them. Skell, the spirit of the above world, came to the defense of the people. For many days and nights, Lau and Skell fought through rivers of fire and curtains of ash. In a last burst of fury, Skell drove Lau back beneath the earth to his place of darkness and terror, and then collapsed the mountain over him. To block Lau's escape, spirits of the storm covered the gateway to the underworld with water, and peace and quiet returned to the earth.
The scientific version is less fanciful, but in its own way just as dramatic. Imagine Mount Mazama, the peak that once stood here, towering as high as 12,000 feet. Geologists believe that about 7,000 years ago, the most violent volcanic explosions this continent has ever known occurred here. These cataclysmic volcanic blasts made the mountain collapse. Over time, rain and melting snow filled the basin. Mount Mazama's mighty summit once stood 6,000 feet above the present-day surface of the lake. Although Crater Lake today is peaceful, there is no evidence to prove that the volcano is extinct. Since the mining days of the West, the lake has been given a number of names, from Deep Blue Lake to Lake Majesty. The Klamath tribes called it simply the Lake of Blue Waters, a sacred place where they came to bathe, seeking contact with the spirit beings who dwelt here. Certainly there seems to be a spiritual atmosphere about this lake. It is so pure that it ranks among the most transparent bodies of fresh water on Earth. It's the deepest lake in the United States, 1,932 feet. This great depth and the exceptional clarity of the water account for its incredibly blue color. The dazzling incandescent surface is pierced at one point by a miniature volcanic cone, a volcano within a volcano. It is called Wizard Island. Another formation in Crater Lake is a strange mass known as Phantom Ship. It is anchored just off the southern shore with masts and sails of stone, almost 15 stories high. It was in 1902 that the United States Congress created Crater Lake National Park. So today, this place, born in violence and held in reverence by an ancient people, is now preserved for all time. A vast natural sanctuary in Oregon's High Cascades. Mount Rainier, the gem of the Cascade Range, aloof, majestic, a towering broken volcanic dome. Its gleaming bulk dominates Washington State's coastal horizon for 100 miles in every direction. The great white monolith is a landmark of many moods. A sculpture of ice and stone that often seems a thing alive, constantly changing with the light, the weather, the clouds. People of the region refer to it simply as the mountain. It so dominates their skyline that even in this land of natural spectacles, there is no problem identifying the peak to which they are referring. Strange, then, that the mountain apparently made no outstanding impression on the first European to describe it. He was the British explorer, Captain George Vancouver, who sailed through Puget Sound in the spring of 1792. Vancouver wrote that the peak was, quote, a round, snowy mountain. Vancouver then named it in honor of Peter Rainier, a fellow English navigator who incidentally never saw his mountain namesake. But other early visitors were more impressed. When this area was still marked on maps of Western America as part of that sprawling territory known as the Oregon Country, Mount Rainier was a landmark for pioneers crossing the Cascades through the Natchez Pass. When they saw the mountain, they knew their hard journey was almost at an end. Rainier became an obsession for one early mountaineer, Philemon Van Trump.
The first true vision of the mountain, revealing so much of its glorious beauty and grandeur, swelling up from the plain and out of the green forest till its lofty triple summit towered immeasurably above the picturesque foothills. I then and there vowed that I would someday stand upon its glorious summit, if that feat were possible to human effort and endurance.
Van Tromp was to prove that indeed it was possible. In 1870, he and fellow mountaineer Hazard Stevens became the first to stand on the summit. Today, Mount Rainier is scaled by thousands of experienced climbers each year. But it's still rated a real challenge. Tough enough so that some U.S. expeditions preparing to scale Mount Everest practice among the icy cliffs and deep crevices of Rainier. But the summit isn't its only attraction. More than 300 miles of trails have been built since Mount Rainier was designated a national park in 1899, including the Wonderland Trail that takes backpackers on a 90-mile circle route all the way around the peak. Someday, part of this colossus of rock and ice may disappear in the same kind of volcanic fury that had so altered its sisters of the Cascades. Eruptions that in recent time blew the top off Mount St. Helens to the south, and long ago transformed Mount Mazama into the vivid blue bowl that became Crater Lake. But for now, Mount Rainier remains serene, a dazzling and commanding presence thrust more than 14,000 feet into the sky, the most imposing alpine sculpture in the Pacific Northwest. Within sight of Rainier's summit lies a parallel group of mountains, less dominant and lofty, yet holding within their rocky grasp an enchanted forest unlike any other in America. The famed Hoh Rainforest in Washington's Olympic National Park is a luxuriant emerald wilderness of towering forest monarchs, shaggy moss, enormous ferns, and delicate lichen lacework. Cloaking the western slopes of a wave-washed peninsula, this remarkable wildwood seems a place suspended in time. Footsteps are muffled by a carpet of forest duff nearly 2 feet thick. The towering colonnades of trees baffle the wind and filter out some of the abundant rain. The only sounds are the trickle of a brook, the occasional chatter of a squirrel, and perhaps a bird call from the forest canopy 20 stories overhead. Early visitors to the rainforest were puzzled by the fact that in many places the enormous trees grow in straight rows, as if carefully planted. Here is the secret. The dead needles and other debris on the forest floor are so thick that seeds are usually buried too deep to grow. But fallen trees act as fertile hosts, providing the seedbed that sustains the next green generation. Foresters call them nurse logs. As a wilderness giant decomposes, it nourishes the newcomers that grow in a straight line where the old-timer fell. As the name suggests, the rainforest owes its vibrant life and haunting beauty to an enormous amount of fog and rain. This is, in fact, not only the rainiest place in the continental United States, It also has one of the heaviest rainfalls in the world. The reason? The jumble of mountains that creates a barrier all along this rugged peninsula. Clouds that form in the Pacific blow in and are trapped against the western slopes. There they rise, cool, and release their moist payload. The result? An average annually of almost 150 inches of rain along the lowland valleys. Mount Olympus, perpetually coated with ice, snow, and glaciers, crowns this range. The runoff forms the headwaters of 3 sizable rivers and of countless creeks and streams that lace this green bastion. Virtually nowhere else on Earth does one find so many gigantic trees of so many different species as in this rainforest. And they are the principal attraction of Olympic National Park. But nature has endowed this peninsula in other ways as well. One example, the herds of handsome Roosevelt elk, named for Teddy Roosevelt. Once all but extinct, today, more than 5,000 roam freely. An almost 60-mile strip of beaches and headlands has been added to Olympic National Park, preserving one of the most dramatic and solitary coastlines of the Pacific. Here, sea and land meet in a haunting complex of cliffs, polished rock, and crashing waves. The offshore sea stacks are home to gulls and sandpipers. There is evidence that Native Americans have lived in this coastal zone for at least 2,000 years. Today, for the Makah Indians, the ocean is still a significant source of sustenance and cultural identity. Many of their songs reflect their life along the seashore. This dance tells the story of an ancestor who caught the largest halibut anyone had ever seen. Many Makah traditions are ancient and are in keeping with the character of the entire Olympic Peninsula. Another reflection of a place seemingly untouched and timeless. "850 miles north as the seagull flies, other rugged peaks brood over a much more remote land, a realm still being shaped by massive natural forces reaching down from the mountains and shaking the bay with their thunder." This is the spectacular coast of Lower Alaska, a region of action and spectacle on the grand scale. And this is nature's superlative setting for that drama, 60-mile-long Glacier Bay. The world at large first learned of the wonders of this dramatic meeting of mountain, water, and ice from John Muir's lively description. According to Muir,
the icebergs are born with an awful roaring. Tons of water streaming like hair down the sides, while they heave and plunge again and again, before they settle in poise and sail away as blue crystal islands, free at last.
the 5,040 square miles that are today Glacier Bay National Park are an expansive laboratory for hundreds of naturalists. Here among the massive walls of ice, the towering white fangs of frozen mountains, and the deep, picturesque fjords, scientists can gain insight into the powerful forces that shaped our planet. An advancing glacier has been compared to a combination of a bulldozer and a conveyor belt. It pushes and carries debris forward from the mountains. For a while, the glacier will slide forward. When it reaches deep water, it melts back in retreat, then gathers power and advances again. Eventually, what is left behind are scoured landscapes newly emerged from an ice age. Here, one may step onto land just awakening from a winter's night that may have lasted 10 centuries. The virgin land, newly released from the ice, gives birth to tiny plants. Grasses and flowers begin to take a precarious foothold. The green conquest of the glacier's great land has begun. One day a lush forest will stand here, as it does in many of the valleys bordering Glacier Bay. Then, perhaps in a few thousand years, another ice advance will doom the forest, and the glacial cycle will begin again. Meanwhile, the bayside woodlands provide home and forage for an impressive array of Alaskan wildlife, including the bald eagle, the grizzly bear, and the moose. During the long days of summer, clouds of seabirds descend on Glacier Bay. More than 200 species have been recorded within the park. It is appropriate that a place of such superlatives, of natural forces on such an enormous scale, would be the playground and dinner table for the Earth's largest creature. The minke, the orca, even the rare and endangered humpback can be spotted in these waters. Other lessons from nature, as well as inspiration from fable, await beyond the horizon, in a land not of ice, but of tropical trade winds. Thousands of miles to the southwest, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, dawn breaks over a mystical panorama of mountains, sea, and clouds. It is sunrise over Haleakala Crater, some 10,000 feet above the Pacific, the crown of the island of Maui in Hawaii. An interplay of nature so ancient that the human observer is dwarfed, an incidental witness to an eternal process. Ancient Hawaiians felt that this spot was sacred. Their legends tell of the time when the demigod Maui came here to slow down the sun with his lasso. Hawaiians named this place Haleakala, the House of the Sun. Haleakala is actually the upper 2 miles of a volcano that extends another 3 miles below the ocean's surface. If the entire volcano were above ground, it would be one of the highest mountains in the world. Over the millennia, the peak of Haleakala eroded. Heavy rains turned the soft, ashy earth into torrential rivers that carried away the soil and hollowed out a huge bowl in the mountain. The result is a crater of surpassing beauty, 7.5 miles long, 2.5 miles wide. Rain clouds and mists drifting below the rim create constantly changing patterns of light and shadow, as well as unsettled weather. In fact, despite Hawaii's reputation for balmy weather, Haleakala's high altitude brings alpine conditions. Nighttime temperatures frequently dip below freezing. Like the Olympics and most other mountains, Haleakala's rugged slopes form a natural barrier, or rain shadow, against the moist trade winds that blow in from the west. The rain shadow causes the air to drop most of its moisture on the north and east sides of the volcano, creating spectacular waterfalls and freshwater pools on the outer slopes of the mountain. But this lush abundance is an exception. Inside the crater, the fiery rivers of lava have created a landscape at once splendid and austere. So isolated is Hawaii that 90% of all plant species native to the islands are found nowhere else in the world. One is the fragile silver sword that blooms on the slopes of Haleakala. The fuzz on the silver sword's spiky gray leaves conserves the moisture that the volcanic earth cannot hold. Each plant lives between 5 and 20 years until, in a last burst of vitality, It sends forth one magnificent flower stalk as high as 9 feet, bearing as many as 200 blossoms. Animal life is adapted to this strange environment as well. Hawaii's state bird, the nene, may be the only goose more comfortable out of water than in it. The nene developed scanty webbing on its feet in order to walk on the rough lava more easily. An estimated population numbering 25,000 in the time of Captain Cook has been reduced to less than 300. Today, the crater is a wildlife preserve, shielded from the onslaught of the once encroaching sugarcane and tourist industries, and offers a protective environment for all of its inhabitants, even humans, who can experience the mystery of this colossal volcano in any number of ways, from the sedate to the intrepid. But the peak experience at Haleakala still belongs to those who are willing to brave the cold winds. Praying for a break in the chancy weather, they stand in awe of the spectacle of a new dawn, much as the god Maui must have seen it when he first cast out his rope to slow down a speeding sun. Here on Hawaii's sacred mountain is a fitting place to ponder the message that nature has made most clear. All creations of the natural world interact upon one another, and the human species is part of nature's system. Thus, we must each be accountable for the way our own actions may affect the natural order, the order that reaches such spectacular climax in treasures such as these, scenic wonders of America.